Kia ora, gentlemen. We're just going to cover yesterday's work, and there were a few questions in there, so we'll cover most of them today. Make sure you go back and review your work. If there's anything that's significantly different from what I discussed today, and just add to it, it will help your understanding of the topic. So on here, we're just going to quickly show some chokes in sport. So people making mistakes, particularly under pressure, and particularly some well-known performers. Again, it may be on silent. I'll just talk over it on each one quickly. We've got an easy layup here. Unfortunately, he's missed the mark on that one. The clutch must be made. For these players at the autonomous stage, it should be easy peasy. Shot, he knows it, smashes bat, high ball in the air, easy catch. For these guys, drops it, and they had to get that point. And the Yankees win the game. And here we've got LeBron James, easy layup to win. Would have been likely a travel as well, because I think he's taken 3 steps in there. But again, play of him, his skill level should have been easy. Another one, he fouled. I think he's got a 73% rate here anyway. I should be getting it in, but has missed 2 of the buckets in a row. Lays up for a second. So now we're just going to move on to that first question. Just going over your graph. So the Yerkes-Dodson theory. If you ever noticed just why sometimes you're a bit nervous, for example, you might do better in an athletic event if you are excited about participating, or doing better on an exam if you are somewhat anxious about your score. We've all heard that nerves are good up to a degree. So in psychology, this relationship between arousal levels and performance is known as the Yerkes-Dodson law. And what impact could this have on your behavior and on your performance? The Yerkes-Dodson law suggests that there are a relationship between performance and arousal. Increased arousal can help improve performance, but only up to a certain point. At that point, when arousal becomes excessive, performance diminishes. And we see that in this graph here. We've got the optimal arousal here. Again, too much, all right, and our arousal starts to drop off. We get too much adrenaline in our body through the sympathetic nervous system, all right? And it's what we need in life, sort of that fight and flight and what we hear. But if we are not ready, and we've all experienced this in our lives, and this is in relation to the 2 last questions you had to do around excessive and limited arousal or stress, all right, then we're fatigued, down the extreme area with sleepiness, we can't get up. Hence why when you're doing some study, for instance, you might listen to some music. Some people would say, such as your parents, would have a coffee. I definitely have a coffee before I do your marking, or any marking for that matter, just to get me in the zone. And this is for performance and or your tasks that you do academically. Right, so moving on there, he was a psychologist in 1908, and actually how he came up with this was he discovered that mild electrical shocks could be used to motivate rats to complete a maze, but when the electrical shock becomes too strong, the rats would scurry away in random directions to escape. Again, that's how he came up with it, and hence the name of this graph. So the experiment demonstrated that increasing stress and arousal levels could help focus motivation and attention on the task at hand, but only up to a certain point. The anxiety you experience before an exam is one example of how the Yerkes-Dodson theory operates. An optimal level of stress can help you focus on your test and remember the information that you've studied, but too much test anxiety can impair your ability to concentrate and make it more difficult to remember the correct answers. And for instance, an athletic performance offers another great example of this theory. When a player is poised to make an important move, like during basketball game, such as a free throw, an ideal level of arousal can sharpen their performance and enable them to make the shot. When a player gets too stressed, however, they might instead choke and miss the shot, like LeBron James in that first one. So this goes into 2 graphs here. I've gone over this one. This one here also goes over the interaction, and this is question 2 now, that you had to answer. Interaction of Yerkes, Dawes, and theory with difficult tasks. So you went over school classification last week, such as simple, fine, fine and gross, and simple that you went through last week. So if the task is an easy task, such as gross or simple, it's not too technical, then you can have a high level of stress and motivation leading into a high level of arousal because it's such an easy task, such as lifting weights. People will get themselves motivated. They might take things such as pre-workout or a number of coffees to get themselves sort of pumped up. Might start whacking their chest as they go through it, make some loud noises because they're trying to get their motivation up. However, if I was doing a more difficult task, right, such as a fine skill, such as throwing darts, or even going out for a free throw or doing a penalty kick in the last 3 minutes of the game to win it, right, then you'd start to move your arousal levels would be down. You see this in the purple one here, right? The optimal zone is slightly different. This also serves a purpose if you are different personalities. And I know if the first 15 at school, they will have and many other teams have this as well, they have a loud room where people are pumped up. As I said, whacking their chest, got loud pumping music. And then there'll be another room, another changing room before the game where people are quiet. They're visualizing the game, and we'll go through how you can alter your arousal levels with different methods. That'll be in our next lesson. But they're going through and visualizing the game, listening to calm music, right? Somewhat meditating, breathing exercises, all these different ones here to bring them down. If we flip those two people around, it would alter them, and they might be an introvert or extrovert, but everybody will start to govern what works best for them. So don't always feel that you have to be pumped up before a game. Everybody will have a certain zone to go in, and players will, over time, experiment with this and find out what really works for you. And you could probably reflect on the games you've had the best performances, right? And the games you've been really anxious and made some silly mistakes because you've been over-aroused, and vice versa. If you've come into the game not really focused, you can reflect back on that leading into it. So it's all about process. We'll cover how you can think about that process as we go through it. Same thing for exams. You don't want to be, this one here will probably be for exams. You don't want to be too pumped up, having a whole heap of coffees before it, you're hand shaking, you're nervous. But again, the issue with exams most likely is that you might be under-aroused, not too focused. But often, sometimes we're over-aroused because it does mean a lot. We're nervous. It's 50% of the year's grade as we go into it, but we can obviously reduce that anxiety by doing plenty of study beforehand. So next one, what does exercise do to us? So exercise, and adrenaline is what our body, when we're impeding stress on us. And stress can be a physical stress, such as someone coming up to us with a baseball bat, jumping out of their car if we're crashing into a car, or some road rage. Then our body, our rapid heart rate starts to increase. We get flushed skin, dilated pupils, start trembling. Or it could be another stress that isn't physical, respect to someone threatening us, but it can be something that is either we're thinking about, we can't get to sleep the night before because we've got a competition the next day, or we've got an important exam, and we're starting to get this adrenaline because your brain is associating that stress, you're visualizing it, and then your body reacts to it. So it doesn't have to be something physically in front of us. It can be something we can think of, right? And it increases that stress. Again, we've all experienced this before, adrenaline and arousal, when we've presented, most likely, a speech. All right, there'll be a minimum amount of people, very few that thrive in that area. Most of us get this sympathetic nervous system. And we also get it when we grab a ball and we're running straight at someone as well, because it served us this purpose, this fight or flight. And the same things, as I said, if we're, say, doing an exam. So these are the sorts of things that happen. We get decreased sensitivity to pain, and this is a process that's meant to help us out. However, we're starting to see it a lot now, even just in our normal lives, without that threat of something attacking us and possibly killing us like it used to be hundreds of years ago when we used to be hunter-gatherers. So dilated pupils, obviously see better, inhibits, hence why we get a dry mouth. Relaxes bronchi, so that means we can breathe in more. Increase heart rate, so we can pump that blood around the body. Inhibits persistence and secretion. So that means we're stopping the gut doing anything. Stimulates glucose production, so it's getting ready to release that glycogen that's stored up glucose into the body, so we're ready to have the energy source ready to go. We get adrenaline and noradrenaline released, right? And it's top of our kidneys that do that. Again, you don't need to know this, it's just helping out a bit more understanding. Our bladder, we don't want to go to the toilet. And yep, stimulates orgasms there as well. And starts us sweating as well. And these are all sorts of reasons that we get, even when we do a speech, but also before an important event, whatever that might be for us. So these are responses. There's a varied amount on here, but you need to know at least 5 responses from the body because of adrenaline being released. Your last few questions that you had to do on here were, how has this affected yourself over time? All right, so find examples. It could be in sport, might have been an exam, might be when you're doing a speech, might have been you've experienced a crash and been involved in one before, or you've got some really terrible news about something. Or many of you may at the moment, when you're under-aroused, might be currently because of the lockdown, Groundhog Day. It's just difficult to get that motivation up. So you're under-aroused, you're doing limited work, or you are subconsciously procrastinating your work. So what happens when you procrastinate? You have to do the work in a reduced amount of time. What does that do? It releases a little bit of adrenaline, cortisol in your body, stress, because you have a deadline. Oh my God, I've got to get that done in 2 hours. I had 2 days and I've left the last 2 hours. And then your body starts to get into that optimal zone that you go through. So that's kind of how that procrastination works. However, if you have too much, you procrastinate too much in that work, and there's too much to do, and that's when you kind of, your brain starts to sort of have a freak out, and you can't do that work. So please review your work. Add anything else. I hope this is helps with a little bit more understanding of it. Any questions, as always, email me as we go through. Thank you very much. Bye.